had what we called enhanced bioterrorism surveillance in place prior to September 11th. Even the night of September, early in the morning of September 12th, when we were still stationed downtown, we began planning for sort of enhanced surveillance. We just sort of thought that the best time to hit us with a biologic agent is when we were down, and we were definitely down after the World Trade Center. We still don't have our phones back, and we were working nonstop on non-biologic issues. But we went ahead and set up a very active surveillance system at 15 emergency rooms in the city, had CDC staff, the EIS officers, basically doing 24-hour coverage to monitor for unusual syndromes. We would analyze this data daily and investigate anything we saw unusual. And those alerts I mentioned went out almost at least twice a week. I don't think it was daily. After the Florida case happened of inhalational anthrax, even before it was acknowledged to be bioterrorism, I think many of us were skeptical. At the time, it seemed too close to where the terrorists had been stationed. There hadn't been an inhalational case in the U.S. in a very long time. So we just recognized the need to sort of more actively look for anthrax in the city, and we began some active outreach citywide to make sure we weren't missing a case. And as everyone knows, I felt like this was the case for the past 2 months. As soon as I felt we were over something, once again we were struck, and I think everyone remembers this headline. But despite the fact that we were sort of preparing for it after Florida, I must tell you, it sort of even took me by surprise when first the NBC and then the other media sites were recognized that contaminated letters were sent. The total outbreak so far is 23 cases. So again, this wasn't a big outbreak. The inhalational cases, the good news is this number is actually better than expected. That were survivors. Here in New York City, we had 8 cases. One was the very well publicized fatal inhalational case. The rest were less severe and all doing well, skin infections. It was a multi-state outbreak, the most recent case being the Connecticut case, and there hasn't been a case since then. This is just a timeline that we were lucky in many ways. The New York City letters that came through seemed to be a lesser grade. Almost all of the New York City cases were the skin infections, except for the recent inhalational case. This more weaponized letters that went to the government authorities were much more commonly associated with inhalational disease, especially among completely among the Postal Service. As far as the contaminated mail, I think I will skip this for the sake of time. The truth is, I was one of those people, if you heard about New York City and Connecticut getting together this weekend, I spent probably more time getting there than meeting. It was a 3-hour drive each way, but we met with the Connecticut folks Sunday to really review our 2 cases and try and figure out, do they have anything in common besides getting mail? The Connecticut folks were lucky. This case, in many ways, was much easier to investigate because every minute of her time, especially outside of her home, could be accounted for, and they tested everywhere they knew she was, including her home, and weren't able to find any evidence of spores. And these spores have been easy to find at the media sites where we've investigated them and the Postal Service. Our case, on the other hand, we only know where she was when she worked. We have very little information otherwise because she lived by herself, and just her friends, unfortunately, she was just very, for the most part, isolated. The only information we really have was her Metro card information, which at least allowed us to see where she was traveling in the city. So we checked everywhere as well that we knew where she was and did not find any evidence of spores. So if this theory about it being due to cross-contaminated or cross-contaminated mail is felt to be true, it's still under investigation. That may explain this case, but we can't say it with as much confidence because there's too much of her time that's unaccounted for. The possibility that they were both sort of random targets is something we can never completely rule out, but there's no evidence of that. Most of what we did to anthrax is what we thought we'd be doing in the event of an anthrax event. The need for active surveillance and investigation, laboratory testing, getting guidelines out, communication, I've already mentioned. We had a speakers bureau as well because there was a demand for even public talks that we were giving. I don't even know how many talks are up to now. The environmental issues remain a concern to us because there really wasn't any data to base these decisions on, and we sort of learned as we went along with CDC, and obviously we're coordinating with key agencies. I think I'll skip this. This is just what one of our many alerts look like that got faxed out on those issues. Any kind of something new to say, we tried to get the information out within 24 hours, if not sooner, because for our cases, we at least knew they were coming out before you did. Our response once we had a case was obviously to communicate, to do an epi and environmental investigation. And this was a changing story because we learned as we went about the need for antibiotics environmental cleanup and preventive measures, and I think got better at educating the people involved given the concerns and stress at each of these sites. We tried to spend a lot of time putting this risk in perspective for everyone. I don't think we did this as well as we would have liked. Obviously, there was a run on antibiotics. I don't think you could have gotten Cipro in the city a couple weeks back, but we were very concerned about the sort of overall impact of antibiotics in the city, especially with respect to our increasing problems with drug resistance, so tried to get that word out. I think the information about how to handle suspicious packages and the response to that sort of overwhelmed the system, both at the health department, the police department, everyone involved. I had actually responded to a suspicious letter on October 8th. I was at a building here in Manhattan for 4 hours with the various response agencies. We had a well-rehearsed plan that we were so used to doing, but we weren't used to 3,000 events occurring over 2 weeks, and that's how many there were. So we basically overwhelmed the system, not just here, but in everywhere. I mean, I think the issues about the mail, and especially given this new theory of cross-contaminated mail, is obviously going to raise some issues. The contaminated facilities in New Jersey and DC, there were hundreds of thousands, millions actually, of mail has passed through there while they were contaminated. And so far, if these are the 2 inhalational cases associated with it, I think the risk is low, and those facilities have been cleaned. The ability to, you can't microwave this, by the way, it doesn't work. Anthrax will survive. Radiation will work, but it ruins almost everything else that's in the mail. So I think this is going to be a challenge for if and what preventive measures to put in place. This is just the issue of communication, which again, I don't think went as well as any of us had hoped at any level of government, maybe better here than in other places, but obviously the biggest issue was just trying to keep the risk in perspective and address the concern and the panic. Easier said than done. This just sort of lists all the different ways, again, that we tried to do it with both things targeted to the general community as well as the medical community. And this just acknowledges that, again, it didn't go as well as expected, even in far-flung areas of the country, less at risk than we were. And sort of some of the articles that were being written, I think, were sort of took it farther than any of us thought it needed to go. But this is just, again, I think I said this enough, that this outbreak so far was very limited, but the attack was very successful as far as the terror. The chances of any one person getting infected are remote. These are just our websites. I can leave this up. I think that was my last slide. So, as I always do, I tend to talk over, but I'd be glad to answer any questions and appreciate your patience. Thanks. I'm in the back and
Could you talk for a second about the air around Ground Zero? Whether it's a public health issue, whether reported symptoms by people who live or work nearby is a cause for concern.
Yeah, the environmental, I was less involved with that. I was more up to date on what the issues were until the anthrax happened, and then we had 2 emergency responses going on at the same time. Our World Trade Center environmental, occupational, the worker issues, they were continuing to do what they were doing. So I just felt a little awkward in responding because I've been so busy with the anthrax with another person. I know that there have been a number of there's a community health assessment that was done by the CDC and the health department a week or so ago to try and quantify what the issues are. Environmental testing is ongoing. I'm not the best person to answer that, and I apologize for that. I don't want to give wrong information. Yes.
Smallpox. How is the infection transmitted as a bioterrorism?
Yeah, there are 2 ways that we theorize it could happen. One is, that somebody weaponizes it, meaning that they formulate it in some way and then release it through a aerosol disseminating device, whether it's some sort of mister or crop duster, but can be a current crop duster that doesn't make the right particle size. But somebody just gets it into some machine that can disseminate it quietly and people wouldn't know, either in a closed environment or in an outdoor environment. That is what is technologically difficult. The other scenario is probably more theoretically possible. Sort of a less well-sponsored group decides to do a suicide attack and basically infects themselves and purposely spends time in crowded areas like the subway or Grand Central Station walking around while they're infectious. Is the other scenario, which theoretically would be, depending on how it was done, would be less cases initially and more an issue with secondary ways. Patients get sick very quickly. Smallpox historically has not been as infectious as chickenpox because people tend to get so sick that they can't get up and walk around. Once they develop the rash, they're usually too sick to walk around. While chickenpox, people aren't as sick and can continue to spread.
So would not be that, would be some.
Be a suicide terrorist that would do that. That would infect themselves, and they might survive. The survival rate is, the case fatality rate is 30%, so 70% would survive. So those are the theoretical scenarios that people who like to think up these scenarios that come up with, just to depress me. Yeah, I mean, to disseminate it well, the best is to do it in a powder. Any liquid form is harder to aerosolize. So these envelopes, especially the second set, I didn't see this, luckily I wasn't in the lab when the first one was open, because everyone that was got exposed. But the Dashel and Leahy letters have been described by my colleagues down at the military lab where they're being examined. As you open this up and you can actually see this stuff start to, with the light and the microscope, you just see it start to move. That the way they process it, weaponizing it means grinding it to a small size. Naturally occurring anthrax usually is hard to... Oh yeah, and so smallpox would be the same thing, that you would want to get it to the right particle size and put it in some sort of formulation that allows it to be spread, whatever the particle is, because it needs to be put in the particle so that it can infect you. Smallpox is very, very small, so you have to put it in something at that particle size. In Ken Alabak's book, he briefly describes it, but the U.S. never tried to weaponize smallpox. Right?
Should not teachers be alerted as to symptoms of these things to protect the children?
Yeah, there was a meeting, I didn't attend it, I had a conflict. There was a meeting with the Board of Ed last week. The Chancellor has put together an advisory group and the health department's participating, for two issues. One is, the ability to detect it. The children, the school health nurse program is part of the health department, so we do have eyes and ears in every school. So there's the detection issue, but also the response issue of to ensure that, I think something that also hasn't been well addressed are the pediatric issues around bioterrorism. Most, like anthrax, the knowledge of anthrax in children is very small in the literature. The one child that we had here that was infected, the son of one of the people at ABC, there just wasn't much in the literature about how to respond to that. So both detection and response and prevention issues are something that the Chancellor is being very proactive about now with the recent events. And that includes education. I mean, the initial outreach is to the school health medical community. There was a training session actually I think it was today, for school health physicians, not just from the health department, but some of the private docs, and the need to sort of roll that out. We have two speakers bureaus at the health department. One is medical and one is non-medical. So we are available and requested to send people out depending on the audience. But it's a challenge, I think, to get the word out and put it in perspective, because I think it's a scary topic, and how best to do that is something I think
it is also hazardous to the elderly, so there's really a geriatric issue as well.
Right. Well, most of these diseases, I think, the truth is we're all, very, very few of these diseases we were naturally exposed to. I think the issue is wherever the release is, what that population is, so if they do it in a place that's primarily children, the first sign may be an outbreak in children. So, it's hard to know what to predict because it's hard to think like the terrorist does. Back there.
Would you describe how you've been able to interface with the state health department?
We obviously the city is part of the state. We had a meeting today with both state health and the hospitals. The CDC rolled out a smallpox plan the Friday night of Thanksgiving week that was 261 pages long, and the hospitals wanted to read about it. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but we somehow got through that meeting. But we as far as during, I think because we're such a large health department, the state wasn't physically here as much as they might be at a smaller area, but they were definitely around to help. They helped disseminate our information, provided guidance. Any issues related to hospitals, they have the authority. And my counterparts in communicable diseases, we talk to all the time normally. And I think it's the recognition of an outbreak. Anthrax was different, but any any outbreak that occurs in New York City is not, especially if it's contagious, it's not going to just stay within the 5 boroughs of New York City. We have a meeting on Thursday with the metropolitan area, all the public health departments easy to deal with when you start thinking about the issues with smallpox and where quarantine fits in, it gets tough. Yes, in the back.
This is more a comment than a question. I totally disagree with the idea that it's not acceptable to vaccinate everyone against smallpox. I've been vaccinated more than once. My children were vaccinated. Everyone I know was vaccinated. And as medical statistics go, 1 death in a million is a very small statistic. So there's a feeling we have that saying no, everyone shouldn't be vaccinated is more because there's not enough supply yet than because it's a bad idea. Anthrax vaccine is something else probably everyone should have. I mean, if you think about it, the president has been vaccinated. Why can't we be vaccinated?
Yeah, as far as smallpox vaccine, I mean, one rationale is that there's not much of it, but even when there is, the federal government, I mean, this is the federal government's position. I happen to agree with it, but I think I think if we had better intelligence information that it was out there, but the data on the complication rate is based on, it's from the 1960s, 70s. We have a much larger immunocompromised population now, and somebody who's vaccinated can infect someone who's immunocompromised, and the infection rate or the complication rate in someone who's immunocompromised is much higher. During the 1947 smallpox outbreak, there were 12 cases, 2 of them died. There were 6 deaths due to the smallpox vaccine. So there's no right answer. Right now, it's not up for discussion at our level. At the state level, it's a federal decision. They own the vaccine. So right now, if we can't vaccinate people, even if people volunteer, or just anyone who wants it, because if we needed it, we wouldn't have it. Once we have enough, I mean, it's a debate that can be had. But I think that what we need is a better vaccine. This is a live virus vaccine. That's the reason the complication rate is high, and that's the reason it's a real issue for people who are immunocompromised. There's also research money going into developing a modern vaccine that's sort of not a live virus. And once we have a safer vaccine, I think then I would agree with you. But I think it's just the issue of the risk for something that is theoretical may be worse than the potential for it to
But
be used.
treat bioterrorism attacks with theoretical. I mean, why do we have to wait till we're hit on the head with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the issue of the security of the smallpox vaccine, but I encourage you to raise the issue. I mean, right now the decision, I mean, it's a decision that's a federal decision. So it's a discourse that I think needs to be had, yes.
When I was younger, each time we went abroad, you had to have a law.
Right.
Smallpox vaccination. Why can't we have it now?
But right now, there just isn't enough. If we vaccinated the entire, we wouldn't have enough to vaccinate the entire country. So if we used it up until there wasn't any left, and then we had an outbreak, we wouldn't have anything to use. So right now, limited stockpile makes the answer easy. When we have enough, which won't be until the fall of 2002, I mean, I think it'll be an interesting discussion. I just think right now, I mean, unless, it's a theoretical possibility that somebody has it, there's no definite information that anyone has it. It's just this theoretical concern that something leaked from the Soviet program. Yes?
I think we should let Marcy off the hook. Seriously, I'm a former health department person who had the great honor of getting Marcy to come and talk with us tonight. But I think we can see that she's had an incredible challenge in the last 6 weeks. I think New York City is extremely lucky to have Marcy Layton on the job. Would close by saying that to the extent anyone can be reassured about our preparedness for bioterrorism, I think tonight you've gotten a sense that there has been a lot of preparation, a lot of thought, a lot of planning. There's no way we can be completely reassured because prevention is the one thing that we can't really do at this point the way we'd like. But if the unthinkable happens again, there is a great deal of preparation. I think the smallpox vaccine argument had better wait. I'm a pediatrician. I vaccinated hundreds of children in my lifetime, but I was very, very happy when it was no longer necessary to do it because there was always the risk that we ran whenever we vaccinated a child. So But next year we can have that argument. In the meantime, again, I thank you tremendously for taking the time to come. I also think that the Women's City Club should be prepared to advocate for the amount of, for whatever the health department says it needs in the way of staff, resources, computers, whatever. Marcy, if you want to make one more comment about specifics that we should ask the new mayor for?
Some kind of budget. The good news for me is that Mayor-elect Bloomberg is the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health is now called the Bloomberg School of Public Health. And I heard him quoted as saying, when he was asked, why did you give to public health and not hospitals? That's what most people do when they have money to donate. He said, everyone gives to hospitals, no one recognizes the importance of public health, which sort of, I didn't know that before I walked into the voting booth. But it was really nice to hear. And his website actually on public health, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, it's very nice. And so I'm actually quite hopeful. And I think the challenge is making people realize that public health is not just medical care and that it is a first responder public safety type agency. But I think we're all concerned, all city agencies, given the economic conditions in the city and the proposed budget cuts of, losing what we've built upon. So we're not where we need to be. We're better off than we were, but we recognize we have a ways to go. So thanks. And I'll share with you those individual questions.